Okay, so I'm sorry about that. I hit the wrong button. That video was getting long anyway, so we just make it a two-parter with an abrupt halt in between. So I've been working on this up until I hit the wrong button on the phone, and we've got her about back to where it ought to be. I'm having to put considerable force on this to force that down. And it's kind of like pushing against a shock. You know, it shouldn't be just rock hard, like, metal on metal, can't move it at all, but it should move slowly and have some give. Oh, I'm going to bend that push rod like that. And that's going down, but it's not like one of these other ones that's collapsed. Like this one here is no good. It's still all full of crud. And you can see that it's just easing up. There's nothing there. There's no resistance. I'm just pushing the spring. So that one won't pump up. But the one I was playing with, I finally got it to where it would. Now, sometimes, if you've got an old rig that's been sitting and it's got a collapsed lifter, sometimes they will go ahead and come around on their own, but not every time. As a matter of fact, I'd say not often. So let's take this thing apart on the bench and have a looky-loo. So here she is. I've already got the retainer. Where'd it go? Here's the little snap ring retainer. It's out. Okay, the first thing that comes out is the part that actually engages against the push rod. And it's got a check valve, a little flat check valve underneath of it. And then you've got an inner plunger. And there is a little hole in there. Right there. See if I can grab that with this. There we go. So there's our inner plunger, and there's our spring, and there's the bottom of it. So that the way that this works, the spring sits on the bottom of here, and in the assembled position, you're just barely compressing that spring. And you've got an oil port here on the side that's drilled in at an angle. So that oil port matches up with this hole, or this machine surface here, that's turned down a little bit. And then there's another oil port right here. So that oil port here feeds oil into here. There's a check valve here underneath of this that allows oil to fill this cavity up, but that's basically a one-way check valve. That check valve allows oil to fill in here, but not escape back out. That's the way it's supposed to work. Now, I think probably the failure mode on most of these is that bottom check valve gets stuck full of crap, and the oil, either this is so full of crud that the oil never gets in there, or it's so full of crud down there in the bottom that the oil never gets down in here. But whatever happens, you don't get a solid feed of oil pressure down in here. Of course, this is all shaken up and down. You know, if you're doing a 1800 RPM down the highway, this thing's going up and down 900 times a minute, which is what, yeah, very fast, like 80, 90 times a second. So, no, 45 times a second. This thing's going up and down. So that's pretty fast. So this part here would set right like that. And that sort of forms another check valve of sorts. And it does allow a metered amount somehow or another to feed up to the push rod, because the push rod is hollow. So this is, as this is working, it's squirting oil up the push rod, a metered amount of oil. So there's a lot of very, very fine tolerances, a lot of extremely precise engineering in this. It's a wonder the dadgum things work at all, ever. So I hope this has been a kind of a good tutorial for somebody to wrap their head around how a hydraulic lifter actually works. The ones that pulled out of this engine, they're all trash. I'm not even going to try to fool with them. We just kind of took this engine apart as a tutorial and as a test run, because I got to put a set of lifters in our green Mini here in a day or two, or a week or two, or whenever I get around to it. So that's about all there is to that. Hope you all learned something. Hope I didn't lead anybody astray. This is not something I would not try to take one of these apart to save it. They're cheap. You know, you can buy a whole set of lifters for under $300. If you're going to go that far deep into an engine, just change the lifters. Save your cam. And you can also hear, maybe, now that we got the oil washed out of that bearing, it's kind of growly. So, y'all drive safe, watch for deer, give us a big fat thumbs up, taking the trouble to film it for you, and y'all have a good one.